They say blood runs thicker than water, but I learned that sometimes blood can drown you. My name is Mia Carter, and this is the story of how the man who gave me life nearly took it away. Hello, guys. Welcome to Petals of Revenge, where we uncover the darkest betrayals and the courage it takes to bloom again. If this story resonates with you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and let me know in the comments if you've ever faced manipulation from someone you trusted. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in October. I was 24, fresh out of college with a marketing degree and working at a small advertising firm downtown. I lived in the same house I'd grown up in, a modest two-story colonial on Maple Street, where my father Richard had raised me after my mother died when I was 8. I should have seen the signs earlier, but hindsight has perfect vision while love makes you blind. Richard had always been complicated. To the outside world, he was charming Richard Hale, the widowed father who never missed a parent-teacher conference, who coached Little League on weekends, who always had a joke ready at neighborhood barbecues. People would tell me how lucky I was to have such a devoted dad. If they could have seen behind our front door, they might have thought differently. The gambling started small, or at least that's when I first noticed it. Horse races on Saturday afternoons turned into casino trips on weeknights. Scratch-off tickets became poker games in basements across town. Richard would disappear for hours, coming home with either manic energy about his big win or sullen silence about his losses. When the wins came, he'd shower me with gifts I never asked for. Designer purses, expensive dinners, weekend trips to the coast. "We're celebrating Mia," he'd say, spinning me around the kitchen like I was still 8 years old. Your old man finally hit it big, but the losses came more often. That's when the requests began. Just small amounts at first, $20 for gas, $50 for groceries, $100 to cover a utility bill he'd forgotten to pay. Each time came with that trademark Richard smile, the one that could convince ice to stay frozen in hell. "I'll pay you back next week, sweetheart. You know I'm good for it." I was working full-time and living rent-free, so the money didn't seem like much. Besides, wasn't this what family did? Help each other through rough patches. My paycheck went into my savings account, and Richard would ask to borrow a little whenever his luck ran cold. The pattern became routine. Richard would disappear for an evening or weekend, come home either euphoric or devastated, and within a few days, he'd need money. The amounts grew gradually, $200 here, $500 there. Always with promises to pay me back, always with explanations that made sense in the moment. "The transmission in my truck is acting up. Insurance payment came early this month. Had to help your cousin Tommy with his rent." I believed him because I wanted to, because challenging him meant acknowledging something I wasn't ready to face. The first crack in my trust came on a Thursday in November. I was organizing my bank statements when I noticed something odd. My savings account balance didn't match what I thought it should be. According to my records, I should have had nearly $8,000 saved. The bank statement showed less than $3,000. When I confronted Richard about it, he had an explanation ready. "Oh, sweetheart, I meant to tell you. I had to make an emergency withdrawal last week. Remember when I told you about the roof leak? Well, the contractor needed payment up front. I was going to pay you back when my disability check comes in." Disability check? This was the first I'd heard about any disability payments. "What disability check, Dad?" His face flickered with something. Annoyance, maybe, or calculation, before the familiar smile returned. From my back injury at the construction job, workers' compensation finally came through. "Should be a nice chunk of money, enough to pay you back and then some." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I pushed down the nagging feeling in my stomach and told myself I was being paranoid. But I started paying closer attention. I noticed Richard would get defensive when I asked about specific expenses. He'd deflect questions with jokes or change the subject entirely. When I suggested we sit down together to go over our household budget, he'd find excuses to postpone. "Too tired tonight, sweetheart. Let's wait until the weekend. You worry too much. Everything's fine." Meanwhile, my savings continued to dwindle. Richard always had reasons: medical bills, car repairs, property taxes. Each explanation sounded reasonable on its own, but together they painted a picture I was terrified to examine too closely. The isolation was so gradual, I didn't notice it happening. It started with small comments about my friends. Sarah seems a little judgmental lately, don't you think? I don't like how Marcus looks at you. Something about that guy rubs me wrong. Why do you need to go out so much? Don't you enjoy spending time with your old man? Slowly, I found myself making excuses to avoid social gatherings. It was easier than dealing with Richard's mood afterward. He'd sulk for days if I chose friends over family time, and living with his silent treatment was exhausting. My coworkers started inviting me to fewer happy hours. Old friends stopped calling as regularly. I told myself I was just busy with work and taking care of the house, but the truth was I was becoming exactly what Richard wanted: isolated and dependent. The manipulation was masterful in its subtlety. Richard never directly told me I couldn't see people or do things. Instead, he created emotional consequences that made my choices feel selfish or hurtful. If I went out with friends, I'd come home to find him looking wounded and sad. I was hoping we could watch that movie together tonight, but I understand if your friends are more important. If I spent money on myself, he'd make comments about how tight money was getting around the house. Must be nice to afford new clothes. I've been wearing the same 3 shirts for months. Every interaction became a negotiation, every decision a potential source of guilt. I started second-guessing myself constantly. Was I being ungrateful? Selfish? Was I abandoning the man who'd raised me alone? Richard seemed to sense my growing uncertainty and used it to his advantage. He'd oscillate between the devoted father who needed me and the disappointed patriarch who expected more from his ungrateful daughter. "I sacrificed everything for you after your mother died," he'd say during our arguments. "I could have remarried, started fresh, but I chose to focus on raising you right. This is how you repay me." The guilt was suffocating. I'd lie awake at night wondering if I was the problem. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe normal daughters were more generous with their families. Maybe I was overthinking everything because I was scared of being alone. By December, my savings account was nearly empty, and Richard's requests had evolved into assumptions. He'd take money from my purse without asking, always leaving a note promising to pay it back. He'd use my credit cards for his expenses, claiming he'd forgotten his wallet or that his card wasn't working. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart. I'll transfer money back to your account tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. When I tried to set boundaries, Richard would become either heartbroken or furious, sometimes both in the same conversation. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? Like some stranger you can't trust. Fine, Mia. I'll figure it out on my own. I always do. Don't worry about your old man. Maybe you should move out if having me around is such a burden." That last threat was the most effective. Where would I go? How could I afford rent and utilities and groceries on my entry-level salary after Richard had drained my savings? Moving out would mean abandoning him, proving I was as selfish and ungrateful as he suggested. So I stayed, and the financial bleeding continued. Richard's gambling escalated through the winter months. He'd disappear for entire weekends, coming home with stories about poker tournaments or business opportunities that required upfront investments. The amounts he needed grew larger and more frequent. "I need $2,000 by Friday, Mia. This investment opportunity won't wait. The guys in my poker group know I'm good for it, but I need to cover my buy-in. If you can't help your own father, then who will?" When my bank accounts were empty, Richard suggested I apply for credit cards. Just temporary, he assured me. Just until his big win came through, or his disability settlement, or his inheritance from a great aunt I'd never heard of. I applied for 3 credit cards that spring. Richard was always there when the cards arrived in the mail, helpful and encouraging. "You're so smart to build your credit early, sweetheart. Most people your age don't think about their financial future." He'd help me activate the cards and set up online accounts. He was so knowledgeable about interest rates and credit limits and payment schedules. Looking back, I realize he knew more about my financial situation than I did. The credit cards disappeared into Richard's world as quickly as they'd arrived. Cash advances, balance transfers, purchases I never made at places I'd never been. When the bills came, Richard would look them over with a concerned frown. "These interest rates are highway robbery. Don't worry, I'll take care of this month's payment. You shouldn't have to suffer because the credit card companies are greedy." He'd make minimum payments while continuing to rack up charges. When I asked to see the statements, he'd wave them away. "Why stress yourself out with all these numbers? I've got it handled. You focus on your job, and let your old man handle the